We've been doing this series for April, looking at some of the ideas from a book called Get Over These Two. Actually, the author's written two books. The first one was called Get Over It, the truth about what you know that just ain't so. And then the sequel, Get Over These Two, more truth about what you know that just ain't so. That's Reverend Paul Hasselbeck up there, who teaches metaphysics for the spiritual education and enrichment program back at Unity Village. He was one of our instructors when Karen and I were in school today. And the phrase that we're going to talk about today that Paul is inviting us to get over is this one. What goes around comes around, right? How often do we hear that? Now this is essentially a true statement. The Hindus and Buddhists have been calling it karma for over 3,000 years. Anyone happen to remember that John Lennon song? Instant karma's gonna get you. Instant karma's gonna get you, gonna knock you right on the head. What goes around comes around. John Lennon was a student of Buddhism and Hinduism, so it makes sense that he write a song like that. Buddhism and Hinduism are known as the karmic religions. And when I say karmic, that reminds me of comic. And you know, I can't resist a good comic, especially when it's on point. I can't resist a good comic or two. Have you seen this one? There's an angel sitting behind the desk, and the desk says reincarnation desk. There's a new arrival in front of him, and the angel behind the desk says, there's a pretty long waiting line for Episcopalians, but I can get you into a Hindu right away. which you know, the gist of that, I guess, is that there's not many Episcopalians who believe in reincarnation, right? That makes sense. Or how about this one? We've done the Hindus, now here's the Buddhist aspect of it. First day of Zen garden school. This is beautiful. The head monk is watching these other monks. The head monk is doing a face palm because, and show the next one here, I gave us a close-up. The ones that I get the biggest kick out of are these two guys. One monk is making a snow angel in the sand, and the other monk is stepping on a rake and it's going whap in the face. The fact that I find this amusing probably tells you more than you want to know about my misspent youth, where I watched far too many Three Stooges episodes. Oh my gosh, that stuff cracks me up. All right, enough comics. Back to the karmic religions. The word karma, it's a Sanskrit word that literally means action. Action. Or more precisely, the force that's generated by a person's actions. We can think of it like this. We can think about it as dropping a pebble into a perfectly still pool of water and then seeing what happens. What happens is there's the initial bloop, and then the ripples go out. And as long as there's nothing to block the ripples, they'll continue going all the way to the edges of the pool or the puddle or whatever it happens to be. And then they'll bounce back. And they'll move back in toward the center. So there is this cause and effect. So when we say what goes around comes around, we're talking about cause and effect. We're talking about our actions, our conduct, producing inevitable results that we will inevitably experience. And it's interesting because in some religions that follow reincarnation, that believe in reincarnation, actions that you take in this life can determine how a subsequent life is going to go. In fact, there are some Hindus and Buddhists who believe that our actions in this life actually determine whether you're born again as a human being, or as something higher, whatever that might be, or a lower state. Some of them believe that you can be reincarnated as an insect or an animal in your next life, depending on the stuff that you did in a past life, which is something to consider for those who believe in reincarnation. I have to say that even though I don't believe in reincarnation, I do get a certain amount of satisfaction out of thinking of some folks coming back as insects or animals. But beyond the question of reincarnation, karma, again, is really about the law of cause and effect. That's what we call it in Unity, the law of cause and effect. Actions have consequences, and when we take the action, we are responsible for the consequences. If we refuse to take responsibility, the law of cause and effect will make sure that we do, whether we like it or not, and sometimes whether we choose to be aware of it or not. Too often we look at cause and effect, or karma, as something that only produces a remote consequence, far removed in time or perhaps even in space, and that's a mistake. That's what Paul means when he's inviting us to get over it, to get over this idea of what goes around comes around. He's inviting us to get over that idea that it's something that comes back at a distant point in time. Cause and effect can be separated by large spans of time, but what we don't want to lose sight of is this very important truth, and this is what Paul is stressing in this chapter. He says, at the level of consciousness, cause and effect are not separated by time. At the level of consciousness, we experience the full force of our thoughts, our words, and our actions the very moment we think, say, or do them. Angry or fearful thoughts produce immediate physical consequences. Elevated heartbeat. Blood pressure goes up. Cortisol is released into the bloodstream, and that can be toxic when we overdo it. And those are just the physical effects. Indulging in angry or fearful thoughts also reinforces the beliefs and perceptions that give rise to the angry and fearful thoughts, which makes it easier and perhaps inevitable that we will have even more angry and fearful thoughts, which points up the importance of staying on top of every thought. Now, fear and anger are the negative aspects. On the positive side, we experience the immediate effects of our thoughts, words, and actions that are based on love, gratitude, compassion, focusing on things like justice and wisdom. Physically, we get a relaxation effect, just the opposite of what we were talking about before. Blood pressure reduces, resting heart rate goes down, the body produces healing endorphins. Cultivating thoughts of love and gratitude and compassion then reinforces the beliefs and the perceptions that give rise to them. Things like our inherent worth, our goodness, the abundance of the universe, the order and creativity of the natural world expressing through us and others. So just like we want to be on guard against fear and anger, we also want to be able to put something positive in their place if possible. So John Lennon, he wasn't just a great songwriter. He understood this at a deeper level. He really understood that karma is instant. Instant karma. We experience the full force of our own thoughts, words, and actions instantly, and then they can go on to produce other effects, like the ongoing ripples in that pond. We set the cause in motion, but we don't always control the effect. We don't always know what the effect is going to be. We may think it's going to be one thing, but there's also the law of unintended consequences. How often have we come up against that? Seemed like a good idea at the time, and then something completely unpredictable, or so it seemed, happens, and we wish we hadn't done what we did. We wish we could take it back, but we can't. We have to let it go, and that can be hard for us to accept. How often do we hear the phrase karma? We hear karma being used in terms of good karma and bad karma. Well, in reality, it's just karma. Action, cause, and effect. If we think about karma in terms of good and bad, what we're actually doing is we're setting up a subtle form of materialism. We can call it spiritual materialism. I think that's probably a bias of our Western culture, our Western way of thinking, because we have this tendency to think of everything in economic terms. We give in order to get. We act according to a reward and punishment exchange mentality. I do a good thing because I think it'll produce a future reward. If I do that, I'm practicing spiritual materialism, which is a form of metaphysical malpractice because, once again, cause and effect at the level of consciousness aren't separated by time. And again, we can flip that to the negative side. If I avoid harmful actions because I'm afraid of future punishment, same thing, more spiritual materialism, more metaphysical malpractice. Our motivation sets the tone for consciousness, so it's important. We try to do what is true, good, and beautiful in this moment based on our present awareness with no thought of gaining anything for ourselves. Now, that's not to say we ignore the ripples. It's not to say that we ignore the potential effect of our actions. We do want to consider that. Instant karma doesn't give us an excuse for being short-sighted and ignoring the big picture, but at the same time, we need to be humble. We need to be cautious because the ego loves to indulge in the illusion of being in control of everything and everyone. In fact, there's another word we can use for the ego. Sometimes I will call it the controller. It thinks it can control every outcome. And the interesting thing about the controller, it's more than happy to take responsibility for the consequences of actions, but only if it likes the consequences, right? If things don't turn out so well, if the law of unintended consequences comes into play, the other stuff, well, the controller says, hey, it's not my problem, it's not what I intended, you know. We do the best we can in this moment. We stay focused on the true, the good, and the beautiful. We let that inform our actions with the understanding that things don't always go according to plan. We can't always control that. But what we can do when we see things going wrong is to learn to adjust. Maybe we need to put a new cause into motion. That we can do. And that requires humility. Because at that point we have to admit that our original action, good as it may have been intended at the time, good as it seemed at the time, might not have been for the highest and the best of all concerned. Humility and caution because we don't always know. There's a Unity class that I think maybe some of you are familiar with. We've done it here before. It's called The Quest. Anybody done The Quest? The Quest is based on a set of books by Richard and Mary Alice Jaffola. There's one of the books there. And this class has been around for a while. I encountered it back in 1998, I think, when I first came to Unity. And it really holds up well. That's the thing that I really like about this book. It really holds up well. It might be something for us to bring back again because it takes a year to go through the book and the workbook, 1 week at a time. And by the end, you have a really solid grounding in our Unity spiritual principles. Now, chapter 8 in this book is where they talk about cause and effect. And they tell us in that chapter that life is more like a sailboat race than a bowling match. Interesting. Let's think about that for a minute. Life is more like a sailboat race than a bowling match. Because when you go bowling, right, you take that ball, you throw it, and you let go of it. Once you let go of that ball, you have absolutely no control. The die is cast. What happens, the end result, the karmic result of you rolling the ball is unavoidable at the point that you let go of it. I can remember back in the days when I used to go bowling, and some of you may have done this too. You roll the ball, you let go of it, you don't like the direction it's going, you start doing this to it. Like that's going to make a difference, but we try, don't we? We call this body English, you know, and you know, like it's going to make the ball change direction. I've never seen that happen. Nope. The number of pins you knock down can be directly traced to the cause, the way I let go of that ball when I rolled it. And if bowling doesn't work for you, the same thing happens in golf, right? You golfers out there, even the pros. Watch a pro game someday. Even the pros will talk to the ball after they hit it. Once they hit that ball, it's at the hands of physics and the wind and Mother Nature, but someone will sit there and say, go, go, go. Or the other one that they do is they say, sit, sit, like they wanted to get down on the ground sooner. So that's how it works in bowling and golf. Sailboat racing is entirely different. The goal in sailboat racing is to get from point A to point B in the shortest time possible, but each step of the way you can change course. You can do something about where you're going. You can make constant adjustments and corrections. You don't just point the boat and hope for the best, hands off. There's a constant series of strategic moves all the way down the course, and that really does sound more like life, doesn't it? Especially when it comes to cause and effect. If we're dissatisfied with something in our lives, we take responsibility for the experience, and then we put a new cause into action, a new cause into motion. The really good news is that we don't have to wait to experience the dissatisfaction. That's the freedom that we have. I've learned to trust karma, or the law of cause and effect, not worry too much about things I can't control. It goes along with what we talked about last week. Learning to discern between the things we have some control over and things we have absolutely no control over. It's really valuable when it comes to things that other people do that might bug me or that I might be inclined to judge. I can rest assured that at the level of consciousness, other people are reaping exactly what they're sowing. I may never know exactly what that is, but that's okay because the lesson is playing out and everything is unfolding exactly as it should. Trusting karma means I don't have to give myself a headache trying to figure out every little thing. I stay cautious, I stay humble, I learn how to put a new cause into motion if I don't like the results that I'm experiencing. And I can guarantee you that each one of you will have a chance to experience this kind of thing. So why wait? Start working with it now. So each week during this series, we've been offering you an alternative way of looking at the situation. We're inviting you to get over saying what goes around comes around, and instead consider doing this. Try to affirm that I am a force for good in the world by what I think, say, and do in the present moment. So work with that one, and we'll see you in June. See how it goes. All right. Thank you.